of young kids about how God created Adam from the dust of the earth. One of the little boys, it sparked something in it. It happened to be the pastor's son. And he said something with an alarm in his voice. He said, "You mean I'm made of dirt?" Now, the teacher kind of chuckled like Dawn just did and responded, "Well, in a sense, yes, you are." Well, you could tell that the little boy was processing this thought in his little 4-year-old mind. Then all of a sudden his eyes got wide and he burst out, "My mom is not going to be happy about that." Today, we're going to be talking, I'm going to tell you a dirt story. A dirt story. Do not go and tell anybody this week that my pastor started the message out with a dirty story. This is a dirt story. How do you respond to that statement? You were made of dirt. How do you respond to that? How does that make you feel? You are made of dirt. I don't think many of us really think of ourselves as being made of dirt, although some of you mothers may think your children are. But you get to interpret the lesson today with just that we are dirt. Today we're going to be looking at a parable that is traditionally called, wrong colors there, aren't they? Traditionally called the parable of the sower. And if you open up your study Bibles and you look at Matthew 13, this will be the label on this section of the scriptures, the parable of the sower. But I'm wondering if it isn't also the parable of the dirt. We're going to be looking at Matthew 13 here. Jesus has been teaching. The crowd is gathering around him. And they get in, he and the disciples, they get in a boat and they go offshore just a little bit to get away from the crowd, but still being able to teach the crowd from that boat. So Matthew 13, we're going to be looking at the first section here, 3 through 9. So Jesus starts out saying, "A farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places, where it had not or did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 160 or 30 times what was sown." Now, this is a simple story, parable. There's a lesson in it. Yet, this simple story, we read it in all three of the synoptic gospels, which kind of tells us maybe we should pay attention to this. It was worth all three of those gospels to include it as they told the story about Jesus. And Jesus actually kind of hints at this with verse 9. He who has ears, scratch that H. He who has ears, let him hear. What that's way is Jesus is saying, okay, now listen up. This is important. Hear what I have to say. You have ears. Listen to what I have to say. Now, imagine a farmer in those days sowing, planting their seeds. They just tossed it out. You've seen pictures of Johnny Appleseed, not back in those days, but with the pouch on the side, casting the seeds out. Maybe you have done that with grass seed in your yard. Just scattered it out there. This is how they sowed their grain and so forth back in those days. He wouldn't have had the sophisticated farming equipment that they have nowadays. That the air-conditioned cab, the global positioning system built into the equipment that they're driving. In fact, some of them basically drive themselves. There's a lot of farmers that have fields, and they take the newspaper and magazines and they just simply read them in the cab of their whatever equipment it is that they're riding in. And only have to really pay attention when they get to the end to turn the machine around. It drives itself. Now, think about the scattering. Don't you think that those farmers back in those days would have killed to have equipment like that? Maybe just the air-conditioned cab. Of course, it might be pretty crowded in there because everybody would be wanting to get in there with them to get out of that heat. We know that feeling. But they didn't have that. They scattered the seeds. So you can imagine how inefficient that process would be. The seeds would go everywhere. Some of the seeds were landing on the hard path. They could not possibly grow from there. Some of the seeds were falling on rocky soil. Some of them fell in the weeds and the thorns. And a few of the weeds fell on good soil. Now, I'm pretty sure that if you looked up good farming practices on YouTube, you would not see this as a good farming practice for everyone to emulate. Any farmer, whether it is those days or today, knows that you don't waste your seed by just nonchalantly scattering it around on unprepared soil. So this parable is not necessarily about good farming practices. It is more about God. And the seed that is sown is His grace. And we are the soil that receive it. It's not so much that God is inefficient with His grace and scattering it all over the place. It's more that He is gracious with His grace. He scatters it everywhere. And the soil on which the seed is sown is us. So in a sense, we are the dirt. But as we all know, not all dirt is the same. God's grace is available for everyone, but not everyone responds in the same way. Just like not all dirt is the same. So He scatters His grace freely. So now then, there's two questions that we need to answer today, each one of us. How will I receive His grace? And then what will I do with His grace? It's interesting that this parable is one of the few parables that Jesus bothers to explain to His disciples. If you read in the scripture, the verses in between the two sections we're looking at, the disciples don't know what this parable is really meaning. And Jesus takes them off by themselves and explains this parable. So this parable, Jesus describes 4 kinds of soil or dirt, 4 kinds of people. First of all, there's the unbeliever. That's the agnostic or even maybe atheist. Matthew 13, 18 through 19. Listen then to what this parable of the sower means. Anyone who hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches it away, what was sown in your heart. This is the seed that falls along the path. When Greg and Tyler were younger, we used to play pepper out in the front yard. Now, if you don't know what that is, and you're thinking, why in the world would they play with pepper and do a bunch of sneezing? Pepper is a term that is given to a baseball drill. We would play catch with the baseball, but it was more than just playing catch. You would catch it, transfer to your hand, and throw it back to the person, and you would get it going as fast as you could. And it helped in accuracy, in throwing the ball, but also in that transfer, catching the ball, getting it to your hand, and quickly releasing it to the where you want it to go. We used to play that all the time. Then we transformed it a little bit into me with a bat in one hand and a glove in the other. And I would hit ground balls that way. They would throw it back. I'd catch, throw the ball in the air, hit it. It was just a rhythm. Just try to get in a constant rhythm that way. Hitting the ball on the ground, them catching it, and throwing it back as fast as they could. What that did was that helped them to develop the skill that they used when they played baseball. And they were good at catching grounders at them no matter how hot the ball was coming at them. That was the result of that. But there was another result. Dad was wore out. Now, the other result was all of our grass in the front yard died. Why? Because of the constant pounding of the ball into the ground and our feet on the ground packed the ground so hard that the grass could not survive. In farming terms, that happens out in the field. It's called hard panning, where the tractors are going over and over and over the field, and they till the top, but it gets packed so hard underneath that the nutritions that they put in the ground just sit on the top and evaporate out. And the roots of the plants can't penetrate to give them the stableness that they need. Now, Dawn complained about no grass in the front yard. I don't know if complain is the right word. But I knew that I needed to do something. So I bought grass seed and I scattered it across our front yard on that hard soil. Well, I accomplished at least one thing. The birds and the squirrels saw that as a smorgasbord. And the seeds didn't last very long out there in our yard. Jesus said that these seeds that fall on the path are like the people that hear the gospel, that don't understand. And I wonder if Jesus might have been meaning that they don't accept it and don't even want to accept it. I was reading recently in a magazine about this so-called psychic services industry. Did you know that psychic reading, that would be the palm reading, the tarot cards, tea leaves, whatever, you know that that business generates over $2 billion a year just in this country? $2 billion a year. And according to this report, atheists and agnostics are the primary consumers of the psychic readings. And this article kind of pointed out that it kind of proved the observation that you've heard. When people quit believing in God, it's not that they don't believe in nothing. Instead, they almost believe in anything. Because there is something in us that needs God's presence. There's that void that only He can fill. And even those that don't believe in Him, they still have to fill that void with something. So they fill it with anything. That's the seed that falls on the path. That's the hardcore non-believers. But then Jesus introduces us to another group. And we're going to call them the morning glory group. Verses 20 and 21. The seed falling on rocky ground refers to someone, this is Jesus explained this, remember, is someone who hears the word and it at once receives with joy. But since they are not rooted, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fade away. Rocky soil is not quite as treacherous as the hardened path. The plants there might fall into cracks between the rock and still grow. Some start to grow. But the prospects of that growth are pretty slim. Because the soil is rocky. The seed doesn't get the nutrition that it needs. And without the proper nutrition, nothing grows as it ought to grow. Pastor King Duncan called it the morning glory group because of something that he had read about baseball, professional baseball players. Apparently, in the coaching profession of professional baseball players, there is this term that's called morning glory syndrome. Morning glories, as all of us know, are a beautiful flower that comes out and spreads in full blossom in the morning, but then as the heat of the day grows, they fade away. So that name then, morning glory, is given to young recruits in the professional baseball who performed marvelously. How is it? Julie Crystal says that, marvelously. They get great potential. But then they go to the spring practice and they're showing their skills in this spots in Arizona and Florida where people go to vacation. But then the season starts and they have to go back into the north and into the long season of baseball and into the hot weather of the summer, and they start to fade away. June comes around and their batting averages are dwindling. By the time July comes around, they are such a disappointment to the coaches that they are cut from the team. Seed that falls on rocky soil is like that. It may take root. It might start to grow and show great potential, but because it doesn't get the nutrition that it needs, it eventually wilts and dies. Morning glory is a name that could be applied to Christian believers also. Believers who make an initial commitment to Christ, but because they don't stay in His Word, stay active in the church body, they don't discover and use the gifts that God has given them. Because of that, they eventually fade away. The rocky soil is barely better than the hard soil. So there's a third group now, the distracted. Jesus in verse 22 explains it this way. The seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth, that word wealth there, if you look it up in the Greek and so forth, it could be easily translated as pleasures of this world. So the deceitfulness of wealth, pleasures of this world, choke the word and make it unfruitful. It never matures. It's inevitable that no matter how careful you are at sowing the seed, some of it's going to fall on infested weeds and thorny ground. The thing about weeds and thorns is that they grow faster than good seed does. Anyone that plants a garden, they know that. Because they grow faster, they're pretty selfish and pull all the nutrients to themselves, and it chokes out the good seed that is there. They also grow faster, so then it overtakes the good plant that is starting, and it just chokes the life out of the good plant. We can call these distractions, because that is what the worldly worries, the worldly pursuits will do to us. They take our focus off of Christ and His will for our life, and it chokes it out. We talk about distracted driving. I think we also have distracted living. That is the seed that is sown where there are weeds and thorns. So we have three groups: unbelievers, morning glories, and distracted. Jesus knew that many of us that follow Him would fall away, or at least would give minimal service to the kingdom. What is that, a Pareto principle? 20% will do the work of 80%. That's what you see in the Christian community so many of the times. Fortunately, there is one more group that Jesus describes, and that is the seed that fell on the good ground, the committed. Matthew 23. But the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop, yielding 160 or 30 times what was sown. The committed refers to people that Christ can always count on. And notice here that what Jesus says about these folks. They produce a crop yielding 160 or 30 times what was sown. Now, the plant that started to grow in the rocky soil, and the plant that started to grow in the weeds and the thorn, had potential. But what it was surrounded with stole that potential away. Whether it was by not teaching, not supporting, not encouraging, they choked, the soil choked it out. And that happens with us. The committed are the ones that are growing, and they keep growing, and they produce that fruit that they are supposed to be producing. And they have bountiful harvest. When we give Christ our best service, our work is magnified more than we will ever dream possible. Our influence on our families, our community, even on our world is greater than we'll ever understand and possibly even see. You just never know. You allow the Lord of the harvest to sow a small seed in your heart. You receive it, and it grows, and it matures, and it multiplies through you and the people that you touch. So who knows where it'll end? So, where are you in this parable? What type of soil are you? I don't think that many of us are that hardened path. If we were, we probably wouldn't be here. But a few of us, however, may be among that morning glory. At one time we were excited about our faith, but as the years passed by, we have failed to spiritually thrive. We've lost that zeal that we once had. Deep in your heart, we miss that feeling of being a part of something that is bigger than ourselves. In our heart, we know we have fallen on the wayside. And I suspect that many of us are among the distracted. Our lives are so busy today. There's so many distractions that take our time away from God. Our time away from letting Him nurture us, grow us, by feeding us with His Word. Even though we are living in one of the most prosperous and secure societies in the world, many of us are lonely and are struggling. Many of us are in a continual battle with depression. Many are uncertain about our purpose. Maybe even uncertain about life. Maybe so guilt-ridden with shame that we just give up. So many are just simply afraid. Something is missing. And deep in our hearts, we know what it is. And that's what we've been talking about the last few weeks. What's missing is the joy of our salvation. What is that? That's that living and thriving and growing relationship with God through Jesus. Producing the fruit. Being used by Him. And knowing that we are. So now we have to answer these two questions that we looked at earlier. How will I receive His grace? And what will I do with His grace? It's a question that all of us have to think about. How receptive am I to His Word? What am I going to do with it? We know that it can't grow without being fed. That's why it's so important to being in church, being in a group together, supporting one another, teaching one another. Because all of us have different, catch that, different gifts. And that's for a reason. So that we depend upon each other to grow. To let others help us to grow. And to help others to grow. To be able to produce those fruits of the Spirit. To be able to shine that light that He has given us. And not hide it under a bushel basket. But to set it up high on a stand. So that it might bring glory to God. And that is the purpose that we have. The number one purpose that we have. To bring glory to our Heavenly Father. This is nothing new to you. But have you started fading away? Have you been distracted by the worldly things around you, the activities, all of the potential that is out there for success, and forgot that your true success, your true purpose is to bring glory to God? Maybe you're not really growing, you're just standing still. Why? Because you aren't growing in His grace and using it. So, nobody can answer that question but you. How will you receive His grace? What will you do with His grace? Father, these are important questions for us. Not something to just look at and go on. Not just to be able to say, well, that was a nice message. But Father, that it would spark something in us. That we really do some examination of ourselves and let your Spirit point out, what kind of soil are we? Father, forgive us for the times we let all this distraction of the pleasures of this world distract us. And in that distraction, pull us away from your family and the feeding and the growth that takes place in your family. Depending upon the world for our happiness. Forgive us, Father. All of us fall into that boat. Father, turn our eyes to you. We don't deserve it. But you just flood us with your grace anyway. Thank you, Father. Soften our hardened hearts. We would receive your word and grow in your word. In Jesus' name, amen. for our final hymn, this story 516, Give of Your Best to the Master. 516. Please stand. Give of your best to the Master. Give all the strength of your youth. Throw your soul's fresh glowing power into the battle for truth. Jesus has set the example. God bless us, see young and brave. Give him your loyal devotion. Give him the best that you have. Give of your best to the Master. Give of the strength of your youth. Glad in salvation's full armor. Join in the battle for truth. Give of your best to the Master. Give him first place in your heart. Give him first place in your service. Consecrate every part. Give to you to be given. God is great love and some gave. Gratefully seeking to serve him. Give him the best that you have. Give of your best to the Master. Give of the strength of your youth. God in salvation's full armor. Join in the battle for truth. Give of your best to the Master. What else is worthy his love? He gave himself for your ransom, gave up his glory above, laid down his life without murmur, you from sin's ruin to save. Give him your heart's adoration, give him the best that you have. Give of your best to the Master. Give of the strength of your youth. But in salvation's full armor, join in the battle for truth. You may be seated for a few announcements. Be remembering this evening will be the visitation for Seal. It's at Texarkana Funeral Home on the Arkansas side. It'll be from 6 to 8. I know a lot of people are wondering about how this is going to work with the COVID and so forth. Everyone will have to wear a mask, and they ask that you practice social distancing. We had heard that they would just file everybody by in certain groups, but they are allowing you to stand around and to mingle with each other, but asking you to practice the social distancing and so forth. The funeral is tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock at the same place. There again, wear a mask. And so forth, and then the graveside service will be following that. The church ladies will be having a meal here at the fellowship hall for the family afterwards. So bring your masks. We Did you hear if they had masks available or not? Well, don't.
Minor was gonna check with them and let us know, but I haven't heard that.
So anyways, go prepared with the mask. I'm sure there will be some extra masks there if you forgot, or whatever. I have printed out the schedule for the virtual conference. It's going to be July 26th through August 1st. We're not having the normal conference, but they're going to try to do a lot of the conference virtually on different places. Most of it I think I heard was probably going to be on the Facebook group, the 2020 conference, and I will get that information to you for sure. Some of it will be Zoom meetings, there will be kids conferences, and so forth. But anyways, I printed out a bunch of the schedule. I got them sitting back there so that you can pick them up and kind of be looking at them. One of the things that we will need to talk about here in probably this next week or so on whether we want to do watch parties type of thing here at the church where we have it on the screen, so forth, so it makes it a little bit more like conference or whatever, but that is a possibility. On Sunday, the 26th is when they have their 5K run, the gospel run. We are going to do that, not the run part. Maybe not even the 5K part. But we have decided that Sunday morning we are going to encourage those that want to be a part of it. We'll be meeting out at Bringle Park and we'll walk out there as far as you want to walk, as many times as whatever. I was going to try to get out there this week and kind of see what that normal one going around, how long that was with everything going on this week. I wasn't able to get out there, but anyways, and we will do that, not what is going to be on their schedule. They're suggesting going ahead and doing our time, 10 o'clock in the morning that Sunday. We will do it earlier than that with the heat and so forth. I would like to say 7, but don't be thinking about it. We might have to make it 8 to start that and so forth. So we will be doing that. I forgot to get that. I printed out some bulletin inserts, and I set them back there last week. I don't know if you picked them up or not. I didn't even look to see if there's how many are back there. But there's a place on there that you can go to, a website that you can register for this. This is funds that the Missionary Society are raising, and they're using these funds to help other countries with the COVID. It's really been devastating to a lot of places. It's been bad enough here, but the economy in other foreign countries, third world countries, have really been hit hard with this. So that's what the funds are going to be raised for, and you can sign up for that there. I think that covers everything. You need any help with the food or anything, Mom?
Not necessarily. Anybody ladies that want to help with the dinner, we're having it here at 5 tomorrow. And that gives them plenty of time for the service and the graveside, and then for us to get back and let somebody in. Let them in to bring food, I mean.
I was going to say we're asking people to register by Wednesday if they want the supplies to go with that for VBS, since it's the next week.
Okay. What do you mean by register?
Online, with the link, it's on the Facebook, and it's also on the flyers. I can send out the Facebook invite again with the thing if you want.
And we're needing people to help put the supplies together. and so forth. We need to talk about how we're going to do that. Anything else with connection with the VBS that you can think of? All right, well, let's stand up and we'll be dismissed. I will want you to notice that I cut a bunch of stories out of the message today, so it was short. Did you catch that? Father, we thank you for your thought. Father, and for the forgiveness that you give us. I pray, Father, that our hearts were soft enough to receive some kind of a message this morning from you. And that we would have a deep desire to apply that to our lives. Father, sometimes it doesn't feel good to have our hearts, the soil tilled up to receive. That, Father, help us to receive that with joy. With your joy. And let your grace grow in our lives. To the point where we produce it and give that out to all. I ask in Jesus' name. Amen.